Today we have a special surprise for you. We're taking you to the house of the great painter Jan Matejko. Let's go inside.
The National Museum in Krakow was established by a resolution of the Krakow City Council on October 7, 1879, as the first national museum institution at a time when the Polish people were deprived of their own statehood and country, which had been appropriated by the partitioning powers of Austria, Russia, and Germany. Until the end of World War I, it was the only such large museum accessible to the public in the Polish lands, and to this day remains the institution with the largest numbers of collections, buildings, and permanent exhibitions. The collection of the National Museum in Krakow was begun with Nero's torches, Henryk Szymanowski's painting presented to the city of Krakow by the artist himself on October 5, 1879, with the intention of creating a gallery of national art in the Sukiennica, the cloth hall. The following day, October 6, 1879, 39 artists attending the celebration of Józef Ignacy Kraszewski's 50 years of work as an author gathered in Konrad Wenzel's townhouse at the main market square and promised donations of their works to form the initial collection of the newly formed museum. The artist's example was soon emulated by private individuals who began to send donations to the museum in the Sukiennica.
Welcome to Poland Daily Culture. Today we're taking you to Krakow, to the house of Jan Matejko, a great Polish painter. Today my guest is Mrs. Marta Kłak-Ambruszkiewicz, the curator of the exhibition here and of the museum. Hello and welcome. Hello. Is it true that he started studying at the Academy of Fine Arts at the age of 13, which is very young?
Jan Matejko
started his education in this house. As his father was a music teacher, Matejko family bought this house in 1794. Johann Peter Rosberg, Matejko's maternal grandfather, moved to Krakow from Saxenia. He chooses Krakow to settle and opens his crafts workshop on the ground floor of this house. He was a saddler maker. Here is also where the future parents of Jan Matejko met. Rosberg's daughter, Joanna Karolina, and Franciszek Matejko, who moved to Krakow to teach music. He teaches music to children while being very demanding. It must be remembered that in the 19th century education was very expensive, and as we know, there were 11 children in the house to be cared for.
A w tym domu jest kilkanaścioro dzieci.
How many siblings did he have, Matejko?
Matejko rozpoczyna naukę w wieku 7 lat w szkole realnej u świętej Barbary. Potem chodzi do gimnazjum.
Matejko began his education in Szkoła Realna at the age of 7. Later, he would join St. Anne's Junior High. Not having received a promotion to the final grade of junior high, a huge fight breaks out in this house. Jan Matejko's father, Franciszek, believed that his son's career had just come to an end. Franciszek expected Matejko to become a music teacher. He was raising him up to become one by teaching him music here in this house. Matejko's oldest brother, Franciszek, was already working in the Jagiellonian Library at the time. He was also a lecturer at the Jagiellonian University. He had the idea to show his teenage brother's sketches to Wojciech Statler, a professor of the Krakow Academy of Fine Arts. Statler lived on Floriańska Street at the time. He was practically a neighbor of the Matejko family. He looked at Jan's sketches and conditionally admitted him to the academy. After a year, it became apparent that Matejko was not only very gifted, but also extremely hard-working in terms of his interests. He then became a full-fledged student of the Krakow Academy of Fine Arts. And once he finished it, he did so receiving a gold medal, which allowed him to receive a scholarship to Munich. At the time, young artists growing up in the Austrian partition, known as Galicia, could only receive education from either Munich or Vienna.
Mogli kształcić się artystycznie tylko w Monachium albo w Wiedniu.
At the Monachium School for Artists?
W Akademii Sztuk
Yes, the Academy of Fine Arts in Munich, that is where Matejko spent his time during scholarship. However, he was much more interested in, and that might interest our viewers, museum galleries. That is where he would interact with other artists' work. He would even buy photographs of their paintings, which led to us having a very broad photographic evidence of 19th century paintings. Matejko was also interested in various forms of museum presentations. The time he spent in Munich, which is the second half of the 19th century, is a time when there were no museums built in Krakow yet. Museums in Munich, which is where he first experienced them, and in other parts of Europe, which he visited as a famous artist later in his life, sparked his interest. And I think it is worth mentioning that this would prove to be beneficial. In 1885, Jan Matejko, as the director of the Krakow Academy of Fine Arts, became the first president of the committee organizing the National Museum in Krakow.
w Krakowie.
Just how strong the need to create such an institution was is exemplified by the fact that soon after the opening of the first museum exhibition in September 1883, the volume of donations grew exponentially. Not only single objects, but whole collections were donated. From the outset, the museum gathered works by contemporary and historic Polish artists from wherever they had lived or worked. The items collected included national mementos and objects connected with individuals recognized for their services to the country or otherwise relevant to national history and culture, including art prints, manuscripts, old prints, numismatics, decorative art objects, and militaria. As far as possible, examples of foreign art, including Far Eastern art, were collected as well. The turn of the 20th century coincided with a change of director at the National Museum, following the unexpected death of Professor Władysław Uszczkiewicz on May 23, 1900. The committee of the National Museum announced a competition which selected Dr. Felix Kopera, until then the director of Count Emeryk Hutenczapski's museum in Krakow, and his appointment followed on April 25, 1901. In the same period, the museum doubled its floor space after the Friends of the Art Society vacated the other wing of the Sukiennica. Following renovation work, an entirely new, considerably larger modern exhibit was arranged, which, in addition to showing artworks chronologically and thematically, also included archaeological and ethnographic objects. The collecting of the latter was discontinued soon thereafter due to shortage of space, and in light of the rise of institutions specializing in these areas.
I read once that Matejko used to paint with his nerves because he was smoking a lot of cigarettes and drinking a lot of coffee, and that was his fuel, kind of. Is that true?
Kiedyś jeden z kronikarzy przejeżdżających przez Rzeczpospolitą w XVII wieku
A certain chronicle who happened to be in Poland in the 17th century said that the climate in Poland was wicked. Undoubtedly, the climate in Krakow, reportedly similar to the one in Madrid, leads people with low blood pressure to have very bad days. Today, from the perspective of years and years of thorough studying of Jan Matejko's life, I think that Jan Matejko indeed was a person suffering from low blood pressure and needed gallons upon gallons of coffee. He reportedly drank very strong coffee and unfortunately smoked a whole lot of tobacco, cigars to be precise. His eating habits were also poor. Jan Matejko was a deeply introverted person, withdrawn even. He relieved that Polish history inside him of himself. And he would only let his nerves get the better of him when a situation would force him to do so, especially when he needed to voice his opinion in a strong manner. His art was undoubtedly his life's mission, which he found in his early teens. Today, it might be hard to believe that a teenager would make his life's mission to illustrate Polish history. This was the most important element of his life. Family came right after that, his wife, children. But it must also be said that Jan Matejko was a deeply religious person. The devotion to the higher power was immensely important to him.
I życie duchowe, to oddanie Najwyższemu było dla niego również bardzo istotną sprawą.